Hey everyone, I'm joined by a good friend, Ryan Green, the CEO of Gridwise. Ryan, thank you for doing this for us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sergio. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we had you've been on the show before, and we talked about other issues, but now you've done some data analysis, which you guys are really good at, and we were lucky enough that you shared it with us. And then I wrote an article for our blog that autonomous vehicles are actually affecting driver earnings. And you did a whole bunch of studies, not just earnings, but trip count and utilization rates and things like that. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that because I think a lot of drivers are still ignoring the fact that they're looking into the tunnel. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. They think it's the
Yeah,
exit of the tunnel. I don't think it's the exit of the tunnel. I think it's the train coming at them. So we'll talk about that a little bit. So yeah, let's share some of your data that you pulled, and city by city, and if you have them, obviously. But let's
yeah,
get on it.
yeah. Well, again, thanks for having me on the show today. I think, for us, as you mentioned, we're at Gridwise, we're a very data-driven company that's really focused on, at our core, empowering gig drivers and helping them maximize their earnings. And as they're doing so, we have hundreds of thousands of these drivers using our platform, and we're helping to kind of bring all of their earnings, their performance, and everything into one place, as one of many things that we do to empower them. And as we do so, it helps give us visibility into, how are people working, how are they being paid, et cetera. And so I think this is a pretty hot topic as we think about autonomous vehicles rolling out into different cities, and how is that actually impacting pay? How do we think about what a hybrid is this? Are we starting to get a sneak peek of what a hybrid market looks like when we start to see markets like Austin, where multiple autonomous players are kind of all operating there at once? And so, as we're publishing a lot of different types of reports on a pretty frequent basis. We're working to publish even more in the near future. And as we're doing so, this report was very focused on the early signs, or any early data we can kind of glean from like the impact that autonomous vehicles are having in the markets where they're most prominently operating. Our study really focused in on Austin, Los Angeles, Phoenix, San Francisco, and as we did so, we kind of compared those markets to what we see that's happening in like the nationwide. So that's like our benchmark that we're looking at right now. And so I think the takeaway, or TLDR here, is that we are seeing an impact to pay across the board. Every one of those markets, as we look at year over year from July, we looked at like kind of July 2024 to July 2025, and we looked at a degree of different pay stats. We looked at pay per trip, we looked at hourly pay, we looked at monthly gross pay, and I would say per trip pay and hourly pay were down across every city, while nationwide what has been up. Actually, every pay metric was up nationwide. So we saw pay per trip increase 3.4%, hourly pay increase 1%, and monthly gross pay, the pay that you're taking in every month, is about 8% up nationwide. So when we look at the different markets, is like, yes, consistently down across hourly pay, mostly down across per trip pay, and a bit of a mixed bag across some other stats as well. And I think it helps us like infer a few differences that these markets may have, as they're have just a varying degree of how how these companies are operating in each city. I think for us is like, what's interesting to look at is you look at pay, but you also look at what we would call like throughput, like how many trips is someone completing in an hour, and you also look at utilization, because that's helping us understand, like, as we think about, all right, someone's out working, we look at throughput, we're like, how many trips can someone complete, and how does that compare to their hourly pay, but also how long does someone utilize, how much time are they spending active with someone in their vehicle, versus looking around or sitting around waiting for a ride request. And so as we look at some of the call outs I'll make here, and then happy to jump into different stats or different markets and some things that we're seeing. I think it was really interesting to see is that a city like Los Angeles was one where you see a wide adoption of Waymos happening in the market. It was by far, as we looked at like the monthly gross pay, by far had the largest decline in monthly gross pay that people take home. Is like there's a 18% decline year over year that we saw in the Los Angeles market. But in parallel to that, as we looked at you look at hourly pay is down about 5%, but utilization and trips per hour were also down pretty substantially. That market stood out much different, like much more than other markets where, as it relates to the utilization and the trips per hour. So really, what we're seeing there is that like, hey, the hourly pay is down already. You're during an hour, you're receiving less trips than you used to, but you're actually, you have less, there's less active time that you have with people in your vehicle at that time. And
Right.
why could that be happening? Is that could be happening for a multitude of different reasons as we think about the dynamics of what's changing. But some of the things that we think is happening there is like the ride types or the types of rides that people are receiving are maybe different than what like the mix of those is different. Whereas you think
Yeah.
about long distance trips is like human drivers are still completing a lot of the long distance trips. For autonomous vehicles, their game right now is optimizing for short distance trips. They
Yeah.
want as many short, point A to point B trips as possible, and to just keep, stay active as long as they can and increase their utilization as high as possible.
Yeah.
And so
Well, uh,
they are
yeah, no.
foregoing those short trips, and then the human drivers are taking more of those. And so I think there's a longer waiting time for a lot of those trips if you're in between trips, and so that may be impacting your utilization quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, the Los Angeles, I could fully understand because I think we have the most amount of Waymos in Los Angeles. There's only,
Yeah.
according to Waymo, only 100 of them in Austin, less in Phoenix, and there's probably LA and San Francisco are head to head when it comes to, but then LA is very spread out, and you're 100%
Yeah.
correct. What is happening is that the Waymos, they have to keep a 90% plus utilization rate to make it worth their while, obviously. And they have charging issues, cleaning issues, and things like that. And they
Yeah.
are taking actually the most lucrative trips away from drivers, which are the short surge trips. For a driver, that's his gold, that's his bread and butter. And what's happening is that now the drivers are forced basically because Uber Algo is feeding Waymos all these trips, short trips. And if you look at Uber's data, about 80% of Uber trips are 7 miles or less. So Waymos are taking all those trips, and then they're positioned, in LA, for example, in Hollywood, downtown, Santa Monica, places like that.
Hmm.
And those are the most profitable trips for drivers. And then on the other side is if you take a long trip, we call it nature hikes. If you take a
Yeah.
long trip, coming back is not guaranteed for you either, right? So you're looking at a double loss. And with upfront fares, Uber and Lyft both said shorter trips are going to pay a little bit more, but we're going to rebalance. Longer trips are going to pay a little bit less when upfront fares came out a couple of years ago. So a
Hmm.
lot of things are working against the driver. And, my question to you is, this is with limited scale, Ryan, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
talked to an Austin driver. I mean, there is seasonality in Austin. He's a veteran with 50, 60,000 trips, 5 years. He says,
Yeah.
Serge, my earnings are down 40, 50% because Waymo is
Wow.
taking all the good trips, all the, bar trips, high surge trips, short trips. And, so I think you guys should continue doing this because your initial research ended like in July. And I'm sure Waymo and Tesla are going to keep adding cars, obviously, right, to the car count in those cities.
Hmm.
It'll be very interesting to keep doing this research going forward, what kind of effect this is having. Overall, though, it's unquestionable that it's Waymos and Teslas are affecting driver earnings, right? What do you think drivers can do? I mean, I'm trying to help them out with certain ideas, basically. But
Yeah.
what is your crystal ball saying? Like these things are coming. They're not. Well, they're here. They're not coming.
Yeah.
What? I mean, I know you buy into the hybrid model, right? But
Yeah.
the chips we're given are not profitable to us, right? But
Yeah.
now we're kind of forced to sit there and wait when Waymos are not around for us to do some profitable chips. What do you think the future looks like?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a few things, and I think right now we're really early in kind of how we we'll see all of this start to play out. This is kind of an early snapshot that we're seeing. We are definitely going to keep publishing reports like this and reporting on this. So, definitely going to be more to look forward to coming from us on this topic. I think that as we think about what drivers can do, I think one of them, what's always surprising to me, Sergio, is just like the how low the percentage of drivers is that are actually going out there and multi-apping.
Yep.
I just hear so many drivers, and when I'm taking rides, I just hear drivers saying it's just like, yeah, I only drive for Uber, I only drive for Lyft, or I don't do delivery, or I only do delivery, or things like that. And you've got to kind of create a portfolio of these platforms that you're working for here, and you kind of figure out what's working. You want to, if you're doing, let's say you only want to do rideshare, and like have them both on. There's nothing that's going to, like, you're only going to get more trips. Some people don't want to deal with bouncing between other apps, but it's money in your pocket. And so if you want to maximize your time, maximize your earnings, that is one thing you should definitely be doing. I think right now we see actively, like, more and more people are signed up for multiple platforms, but actively each month we only see about 30% of drivers multi-apping right now.
Wow.
And that's a really low amount. And so as you look at that, my recommendation would be like, not only multi-app within a category, operate across categories, and then use apps like, I'll put out a shameless plug, like Gridwise, to figure out, to help you best plan for, like, hey, when's the best times to maximize my income for delivery, for grocery versus food versus rideshare, because I can use Gridwise to understand that by time of day, by day of week, and by locations as well, and understand which services are paying, how much services are paying which dollars. And so we have all that information in the app for drivers to leverage. So I think that'd be another thing. And I think as we start to see AV adoption become kind of more and more prolific, and expand just in more and more markets and have more density in markets, is like, I think what you're going to see is that, like, the kind of the base business as usual scenario, where it's just like, hey, it's normal market conditions, is like, you're going to see a more and more autonomous vehicle taking those rides, and the human drivers are going to be, I think, more suited for what we call, like, the peak times and peak demand.
Yeah.
And autonomous vehicles just can't really flex up on their fleet when there's a peak demand. And so what should you be doing now? Or you should be on top of your gig work now. It doesn't matter if you work part-time or full-time, is you should be optimizing for, like, the peak demand times that are going to pay out the most, across categories. Work for multiple categories, work for multiple services, and optimize for the peak times are the things that I think are important. And an application like Gridwise is suited to help you understand all those things and best plan your work accordingly.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree more, actually. So the link for gridwise.io is in the show notes. Please go check them out. But look, we've been saying this to drivers all this time, right? You got a multi-app, number one, because you could get deactivated from one, and then what are you going to do, right? And you're just done. The other thing is, a lot of people do this, Ryan, because every time I talk to a driver, they go, "What do you like doing rideshare?" They go, "I love the flexibility," right? Well, what you just said is kind of taken away from the flexibility. Now we got to hunt for the peak times where Waymos or Teslas can't, have enough supply, right, to cover the demand. Yeah. So if you were working, just morning rush hour, maybe now you have to work evening rush hour. Maybe you have to work weekends now. So it kind of takes away from the flexibility part of the gig. Yeah, I mean, I think with just your numbers that you put out with limited scale kind of threw me off. I didn't think it was going to be that drastic. And if with limited scale, they're that drastic, what happens if they double up, triple up? Because Waymo says by next year, they're going to have 2,600 cars. In fact, as you know, I want to get your opinion real quick on that. As you know, Waymos have been testing or commercially available in only the warm states where there's no rain, no snow, none of that stuff, right? Well, They just announced Denver. They announced Seattle rains 300 days a year. Denver, there's snow. I mean, they're coming. If you think you were safe in North Dakota from a Waymo, I don't think you are.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, eventually, these become, the operational nationwide, and I think they're, it's just part of us as us in the world innovating, and technologies are going to change, and this is how, the world evolves. And so I just think that, the best thing we can do, and what we've always done through history, or those who, I think do well in history, are those who adapt in these situations. So don't I think to your point, Sergio, is like you're trying to say and tell drivers, like, hey, don't be blind to what's happening. Note that this is happening. It's having an impact. So you have to adapt. You have to adjust your strategy accordingly. There's still money to be made out in the market, and you just need to kind of accommodate your strategy to what's changing here to ensure that you're not feeling that like you're trying the best that you can to maximize your earnings. I think it's so what we're also dealing with, and we didn't talk about it as much, is like I think the past few years, tell me if you disagree, is like the market's been oversupplied without autonomous vehicles.
Yep.
And so you've had an oversupply of human drivers. Now you're introducing autonomous vehicles. So I think there's a correction that's probably going to come into play in the market at some point in the near future as well. That's going to just have just a different supply mix that we'll be looking at in the future to help support kind of the right supply and demand balances here as
Yeah, I
well.
have one last question for you, and then I'll let you go.
Yeah.
So both companies are feverishly partnering with companies, autonomous vehicle companies, Google, Uber globally, obviously, Lyft more like locally, and with
Hmm.
companies partnering and putting out as many cars as they can out on the road. Personally speaking, I don't think Waymo needs Uber. But then at the moment, they're just kind of going to bed with them for the fact that they have the network, right? Plug it
Yeah.
in and tell the
Yeah.
Uber algo, feed my cars, keep my cars busy 90% of the time, because Uber can do that for them, right?
Yep. Yep.
And there is a downside to that, because instead of feeding a human driver, trips, they're going to feed the Waymos, because look, a human driver has a 12-hour limit. You got to turn the app off after 12 hours. That's one limitation. Waymos
Yep.
can work 22 hours. You just go get charged, cleaned, and then get out there again. So, what do you think the company should do or could do to make this transition as painless as possible? I don't want you to talk for Uber and Lyft. I'm in contact with them. I'm trying to figure things out, how to make this transition for the driver community as painless as possible, and
Yeah.
hopefully we'll get somewhere. But what do you think the companies can do?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, the companies like Uber and Lyft have to also, as we're talking about what human drivers should do, the companies have to adapt as well. They have to protect the future state of their businesses, and if they don't, have these strategic partnerships with autonomous vehicles, it becomes a threat to their business as well. And some of these autonomous vehicle companies rely on them. Some of them are operating independently, like a Tesla or Zoox or Waymo, and don't need the partnerships, but there's benefits to the partnerships as well. And so I think that for the companies and what I think they should do, I mean, I think the important thing is to be transparent around, like, just create as much transparency on what's to come or what's happening in the markets as you can, to like and not I think for them is like, they're the ones that are going to have the most direct visibility into the supply dynamics, and they're they control how many new drivers they're bringing on the platform. And so there's always more and more new drivers that they need to bring on, because a lot of people are leaving every month as well. And and so I think as the companies, they just have to be conscious within, not oversupplying the human driver side to the point to where nobody's really earning the way they should on those platforms, or what a sustainable, they're not earning a sustainable wage in some cases, and maybe overworking to earn less. And so I think that's where one that would be one thing. And then two is like, we're biased because we're a platform that's agnostic to any company, and we think that, you can work for one, you can work for many. We're not trying to push you one way or the other. We'll advise you to work for multiple because we think it will help you make more money. But I think the companies have to be open with the idea of that as well, and not be overly against the idea. They can't prevent you from doing this, but like, maybe be more ideal to say is like, hey, we're not the best option right now because of demand's just low, or based off of, maybe it's due to the changing the rides that they dish out to AV partners. Maybe it's due to other things, but it's not the best time to work for us at this time. And
Sure.
and that sounds very kind of contrarian to probably what any of them would think there. But there are definitely some of those times and some of those locations where it's just like, yeah, like doesn't make sense for you to be online right now. You're not going to
Yeah.
find a ride for the next hour.
Yeah.
So why waste your time?
Yeah. No, I agree. Well, thank you, Ryan. I appreciate your time. We always love having you on, so we'll look forward to on your next report. I'll write an article and then we'll have you on and discuss it because, this is reality. I mean, they're here. I've been in a bunch of Waymos and they drive us better than me, probably. I don't know. But then there's part of the
better than me
public.
too.
Yeah, I mean, they do, man. I don't know, but let's see how they do in Seattle and Denver. Let's see how that's going to work.
The inclement weather conditions are going to be interesting.
Yeah.
It's a long time, I think, before they can operate sustainably in those types of markets. There's a lot to prove out there.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on. We'll see you around. Stay healthy and enjoy your week.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, and I look forward to the next time I can join.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for watching. That short little clip was from our live stream, Show Me the Money Club with Sergio and myself, Tuesdays, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. Make sure you subscribe, turn on all notifications so you'll be notified when we go live, as well as all of our awesome content. Make sure to check out this video right here, which will take you to the entire live stream, or check out this video right there. All right, drive smart, everyone.